It's time for Top Story on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell. Here's Brian O'Neill.
Well, we learned early this week that a couple of wind companies might use a state law called Article 10 in order to make wind happen locally. Now, it's not a definite thing that these companies would use Article 10, but we learned that two wind companies filed an application online with the state to head in that direction, maybe to be able to use Article 10 if they want to. Article 10, if you don't know, is a state law from 2011 that would make it so that a state board made up of the heads of some state agencies, the DEC commissioner is one of them, and then two people appointed by the local town supervisors would be on the board, and they would decide where to place wind turbines. So that was a big story. The Steuben County Legislature sent out a resolution to Albany asking for reform of the public defender's system. Hornell police continued their search for suspects from the meth lab fire from last week. State Senator Kathy Young, in a hearing, it came out that she says that MTA utility relocation costs in New York City, the cost of that could delay upstate broadband plans. A state trooper was injured in an accident on 390 in the Cohocton area. State police say a drunk driver from Corning ran into the back of a state trooper's car. There were no serious injuries there. St. James Hospital announced a couple of new members to the board of directors. That would be local attorney Brian Shue and Dr. Spencer Annabelle. In other news, the state released a list of struggling schools, and we're pleased to announce that the schools around the Canisteo Valley area are all in good standing. On our show this week, what we're doing is hearing audio from a state Senate hearing that was a forum that was put on in Penn Yan earlier this week. It's about the heroin problem, which is a huge problem in New York State at the moment. And Police Chief Ted Murray of Hornell spoke about that earlier on a Newsmaker show, and in previous Newsmakers, Sheriff Dave Cole has talked about it. Starting out here with some testimony from a woman whose son was a heroin addict. The son died. This woman, her name is Alexis, and she says some interesting things. This hearing was held in Penn Yan earlier this week. It was chaired by State Senator Tom O'Mara.
On Saturday, August 2nd, 2014, Jeff had his 10th class year reunion. So many people who saw my son said it was the greatest they had seen him look in years. Sunday, Jeff came over and we had a nice big family breakfast. Monday, Jeff went golfing with his dad and his little brother John and his girlfriend. Monday night, Jeff used heroin and it killed him. On Tuesday morning, just 18 months ago, they found my son's body. Every day, from the day that I learned I was carrying my son to the day of his death, he was loved. But love was not enough to conquer this addiction. I'm not sure what would have been enough for Jeff, but I know that he was not offered the types or lengths of treatment that we know to be effective. And there are types of treatment and lengths of treatment that we already know are proven to be effective. We just don't offer it here. Though to us the cost of our loss is beyond measure, I have taken to providing the economics of the situation in case there is any confusion at all about the cost to society and the taxpayer, and how truly logical and what economic sense it makes to provide effective and long-term treatment for anyone who seeks it. The costs of Jeff and his fiancee's addiction are as follows. At least 4 separate criminal proceedings, a combined 11 months of jail stay between the two of them in 2 different jails, at least 2 criminal proceedings for the mother, at least 4 criminal proceedings for my son, 18 months of combined probation, 2 hepatitis C treatments at $100,000 each. My son was hospitalized for sepsis and he nearly lost his arm. Those were unpaid medical bills.
I'm going to skip ahead to when she talks about the problems of dealing with heroin addiction in New York State, starting with problems of hospitals not taking in heroin addicts.
I founded an advocacy organization called Truth Farm. We work to reduce the stigma and raise awareness. We create, implement, and advocate for programs and policy change to have a profound impact on the opioid epidemic. We're responsible for implementing 4 PARI programs in our area. One of the problems that we'll have in New York State with implementing the PARI programs is that our hospitals are not willing to participate as they were in Gloucester, Massachusetts, where they were willing to house people who were addicted until they could find treatment. In New York State, they're just not willing to do that. We also provide community response action plans, and we've developed a best practices procedures for hospitals to handle overdoses. Unfortunately, hospitals aren't willing to do that, and they need to be required to do so. It isn't time for a Band-Aid, it's time for a tourniquet. This epidemic is insane. Mothers are losing sons, fathers are losing daughters, siblings, like my boys, are left with the loss of their brothers and sisters for a lifetime. We're creating orphans at an alarming rate, which is anyone's guess what the consequence of that will be 10 to 20 years down the road. Everything that we do, aside from the things that I'm going to mention, in my opinion, are a waste of time right now. We have people right now who are dying and who need help and who literally ask for help. I met with 3 other mothers before coming here this evening. So there's 4 mothers at the table. 3 of us, our loved ones, asked for help and sought help before they ever entered the criminal justice system. Our law enforcement folks are doing an incredible job trying to clean up this mess, but the problem is we need to help people before they get to the criminal justice system, and we need to give them the help that they actually need, not some partial treatment. Everyone says that what started this epidemic was this whole idea that we needed to treat people's pain. The thing that confuses me is that we're not doing the same thing for people who are addicted. They go to the hospital after an overdose, they've been revived with Narcan, and they're in severe pain, and we do nothing for them. We need absolutely in New York State to offer humane medically assisted detox, and that needs to happen immediately. There are other states that are offering same-day evaluations. We need to do that in New York State. We need immediate access to treatment. This isn't a situation where a person can wait days or weeks for treatment. It's a matter of life or death. And I'm going to allow the senator to remain nameless, who told me that insurers are not going to allow this because he's sitting at this table. But I'm going to tell you right now, we absolutely have to require insurers to pay for the type and length of treatment known to be effective. I'm not sure why he's allowing insurers to tell him what we're going to do with our laws. And finally, we need to increase insurance reimbursement rates so that treatment centers can afford to open and operate in New York State. Thank you.
That mother of a heroin addict who died, she was not the only one who testified, who complained about insurance companies looking the other way when it came to heroin addiction treatment. On Top Story this week, we're hearing audio from State Senator Tom O'Mara's forum about heroin addiction problems. That was held in Penn Yan on Tuesday of this week. Now we're going to hear State Senator Robert Ortt. He's an Orleans County State Senator. He brought up 2 very interesting topics. 1, gateway drugs. 2, the problem of veterans who sometimes sadly turn to addiction problems as a way of coping. Starting out here with Senator Ortt on the issue of veterans and addiction.
I was a veteran of Afghanistan, and I know a lot of veterans who come out and who suffer from mental health related issues, and as chair of the Mental Health Committee in the Senate, I see this all the time with self-medicating, And a lot of veterans are being struck by this very epidemic, this opioid and heroin epidemic. These are men and women who served their country in combat, who wore a uniform, who wore the flag on their shoulder, who did amazing things. And yet they come back, and it's not Iraq that gets them. It's not Afghanistan. It's not ISIS or the Taliban or some insurgent. It's heroin, which I think is really tragic and ironic. And on a good side, we've started the Joseph P. Dwyer program in Niagara County. It's a program that exists elsewhere in the state. It's a peer-to-peer support service. And basically one of the things that they're going to start doing is going to the VA, working with the VA when veterans are coming out who have been there for heroin or drug treatment. They're going to be there to get these guys or these girls right when they come out, because that's one of the most vulnerable times, which we heard about, when they are discharged. That 48 to 72 hour time frame is when you see a lot of relapses and actually a lot of deaths. But I know you'll probably remember your son in a lot of different ways. I think you should remember him certainly as a soldier and as a hero for the country. So, and then last but not least, I'll just say that, we heard a lot tonight too about marijuana. We heard, I forget who it was, talking about 5 previous unlawful marijuana possessions. And I met a family in Niagara County whose daughter passed away late last year, and they came up to me and they told me that their daughter, who was 22 at the time, told them that this all started when she started with marijuana. And I know there's a lot of different opinions on this across the country, but all I can say is most of these folks here whose loved ones are either recovering or are not here, I guarantee you they didn't start with heroin. They started somewhere with something else, and that led to heroin. And so I think we have to be very realistic that it's not always a victimless crime, that there are such things as gateway drugs and there are such things as entry-level drugs that lead to something a lot more significant. And while substance abuse is very serious, this heroin epidemic is very lethal. You don't come back from this one, for very long. And I think that everyone up here gets it. We're all trying. We're trying to find a solution. But there's an ownership that's a part of this as well. And I want to thank all of you because you're owning it. By being here tonight, you're owning it. Because if you think that it doesn't happen in your community, you're wrong. If you think it doesn't happen in your family, you're wrong. And if you think that it's just going to go away by itself, you're wrong.
On Top Story this week, we're hearing parts of the Heroin Forum that was held in Penn Yan by State Senator Tom O'Mara. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano was one of those present. We'll hear what Assemblyman Phil Palmisano said at the forum about heroin coming up right after we take a break here on Top Story. On Top Story this weekend, we're hearing audio highlights from the Heroin Forum that was held in Penn Yan on Tuesday of this past week. Assemblyman Phil Palmisano was there.
Certainly the members of the panel who are up here offering your expertise, but most importantly, the 6 of you at the end of the table for having the courage to share your personal stories. You put a human face and human side to this growing epidemic that's affecting every community throughout the state. And as you heard, as we all know, this doesn't matter what color you are, whether you're rich or poor, upstate or downstate. This issue knows no boundaries. And to have you come out and take the time to share that with all of us should give us all motivation to try to solve this problem. So thank you again. I did just want to say, just to my colleagues here in the Senate that, and the members of the community, our Assembly minority did actually have hearings around the state last fall, and we just wanted to make sure we presented that with you. There's some good ideas, a lot that we heard about today, that as you guys go forward and as we look for legislation, we believe there's some good ideas and blueprints in there to move forward, and we certainly have to act. We do these forums and we get this input, but it's imperative for us to act, and it has to be a comprehensive approach, from prevention to rehab to detox to recovery to education to help with law enforcement. And certainly, we need to take the stigma off this and treat this as a disease, and not be afraid to tell the insurance companies they have to be a part of the solution. But we have to do it together. It has to be a community effort, and I think the people at this table signify their commitment to make this a community effort. You being here signifies that you want to be a part of this community effort to solve this problem, and we just want you to know that we want to be a part of this solution and help as much as we can as well. So thank you for coming out. We appreciated your testimony, and we look forward to hearing from the audience as well. So thank you very, very much for being here tonight.
On Top Story this week, a testimony from the Heroin Forum held Tuesday night in Penn Yan. This is a woman who is the aunt of a heroin addict. She talked about how she tried to help one of her relatives.
Your heroin dealer is not your friend. He or she is a heroin dealer. If he were your friend, you would be allowed to talk about it. If he were your friend, you wouldn't have gotten started in the first place, because friends don't want their friends dead. Myth. Heroin dealers look like thugs, and the fact is they can look like a choir boy, be well-spoken, well-mannered, very charming, and come from a decent home just like you did. Myth. Heroin is the ultimate high. The fact is, while the rush lasts minutes, withdrawal symptoms are always waiting for you. They include muscle and bone pain, diarrhea and vomiting, abdominal cramps, insomnia, restlessness, runny nose, cold flashes, and goosebumps, sweating, involuntary kicking motions, racing pulse, high blood pressure, increased respiratory rate, and severe anxiety. Myth. I can handle it. The fact is, Chad James Heaven, December 18th, 1987 to January 5th, 2016, James and Janet Heaven, parents who lost their son, Chad, 28, on January 5th, 2016, to heroin. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I am open and honest and willing to share my thoughts and feelings. Thank you for your time.
Now, while the majority of those who gave testimony were relatives of heroin addicts, a couple of people who suffered from heroin addiction themselves spoke. This is a girl named Ariana.
I overdosed on January 7th, 2016, and the whole experience was completely shocking in every way that you can imagine. There's the obvious, oh my God, what happened? Who are all these people in my house? Then it hit me, this overwhelming feeling of guilt and embarrassment, and the thought of, oh great, now I'm just a junkie to all these people. And it's that guilt and embarrassment that prevents so many from getting help, especially in these small towns. Our community has done a lot to get rid of that stigma. Now we actually need to put the resources together and offer ways for people to get help and make it easy to access. Finding the resources to get help shouldn't be such a difficult thing. With a problem this bad, the information on any resources to help with the substance abuse should be readily available. I think there should be a website that is a database of resources that you can search by county for the entire state. Inpatient facilities, outpatient, sober living, AA, NA meetings, substance abuse counselors, all of that information should be in one place because it is so overwhelming to figure out what is actually available in your area. I think we should offer a protocol to all hospitals in the state on how to deal with an overdose, because it's quite clear they don't know exactly how to handle it in these small communities. I understand being firm with the patient in my situation, but the doctor shouldn't be talking about your condition so loudly that the entire ER knows what is going on with you. The hospital just didn't know what to do or say to me. A social worker didn't come talk to me. They didn't talk to me about detox or rehab facilities. All they did was hand me a packet of information that the YSAT had put together and sent me on my way. Thankfully, I have a family that helped me navigate everything, but not everyone does. I think offering hospitals a basic protocol to handle an overdose patient will make it easier to make sure everyone gets offered the same information and care. I think an amnesty program would be beneficial to the addicts in our area. There were so many nights where all I wanted to do was go get help, but there's nowhere to go in our area at 2 in the morning, and if there is, the addicts don't know about it. The window to actually help someone isn't that big. They need to be able to get the help when they want it, because it is so hard to talk yourself into taking that step and to find the motivation to try.
This next point I thought was an interesting one.
I also want to ask you to take into consideration that what works in bigger cities might not work in rural communities like ours, that there probably won't be examples of programs that were successful for communities like ours because heroin being such a big problem in rural areas is a relatively new thing. So we might just have to take a chance and try different programs until we find one that fits. I understand that it's frustrating from a legislative point of view because it is hard to justify spending money on something that isn't a guarantee. But if it helps just a few people, then it was successful, especially in the eyes of the family affected by this addiction. Thank you so much for allowing me to come.
Thank you, Ariana, for sharing that with you. I know that not easy to talk about that. It's not easy to talk in front of a crowd of people like this either.
State Senator Tom O'Mara there on Top Story. It was Senator O'Mara who chaired the forum on the problem of heroin addiction, which is unfortunately all too much in the news these days. Thanks for listening to Top Story. I'm Brian O'Neill. ABC is next here on AM 1480 WLEA Hornell.